there, welcome back to Cooking with Keely, where I, Keely, show you how to make delicious recipes to share with your family and friends. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need to do for your dough is you need to crack in 2 eggs and add enough warm water to make it to 2 cups in your measuring cups. So let's do that. Be very careful not to crack your yolks. And let's add in the warm water. Now I'm going to add in my egg water mixture. 5.5 cups of flour I measured out, and you need 3 of those cups. Okay, and once you're done with that, you add in 2.25 teaspoons of yeast, a tablespoon of salt, and I measured out 1/4 cup of sugar, and you only need 2 teaspoons of that 1/4 cup. And a teaspoon of vanilla. Vanilla is optional. Just do it if you want a sweeter croissant. All my ingredients in my bowl, I'm going to mix it together using my paddle attachment on low speed and gradually move up to medium speed. So now that I've mixed up my ingredients for about a minute, I'm going to add in 2 tablespoons of melted butter and mix it again. Okay, so now I'm going to put my yeast mixture into another bowl and let it set aside to rise. So let's do that. Okay, so now for my butter, I add in 30 tablespoons of butter that is cold to the touch. And into that, I add in 3/4 teaspoons of salt and 1/2 cup of flour. Okay, so now that I have my butter, flour, and salt in the bowl of my stand mixer, I'm going to beat it till it's smooth, but don't beat it too much. You don't want any air to be in it. So now that I have my butter mixture that I beated until just smooth, I'm going to spread it on an 8-inch square of plastic wrap, and then we're going to refrigerate it for 30 minutes. Let's do it! Okay, so now that my butter is spread out, I'm going to put it in the fridge for 30 minutes. Okay, so now I let my dough rise, and I'm going to put in 2.5 cups of of flour. Now I'm going to add in the rest of my remaining 1/4 cup of sugar. And I'm just going to whisk it till combined. Okay, so now that I've whisked together my dough, I'm going to touch it, and if it's really sticky, like mine is, I'm going to add in my remaining flour, a tablespoon at a time. That's about a tablespoon. And I'm gonna mix it in. I'm gonna trade out my whisk for a spatula right now. Okay, so I added in another tablespoon of flour, and it's still a little bit sticky, so I'm gonna add in about 1/2 a tablespoon. And mix it together. Okay, so now that my dough is no longer sticky, I'm going to use my remaining flour to flour my workspace so that I can take it out and knead it. Okay, so now I'm gonna grab my dough out of the bowl. It's gonna be still a little bit sticky, and that's good. Okay, so my dough was sticking to my hands when I tried to take it out. So here's a trick. If you scoop out some flour and rub it all in your hands, it'll make the dough not stick to you as much. So now let's take it out of our bowl. Okay, so now that I have my dough on my floured workspace, I need to knead it for about 5 minutes. So now that I have my dough that I kneaded, I'm gonna wrap it up in plastic wrap and refrigerate it for 30 minutes. Okay, so my dough has been in the fridge for 30 minutes, and so I'm gonna flour my workspace. Okay, now I'm gonna unwrap my dough. And set it down. And I'm gonna use my rolling pin and roll it into a 12-inch square gently. Okay, so I just took my butter out of the refrigerator and I'm gonna place it on top of my dough. It may fall apart a little bit, but that's okay. Okay, so I put my butter in the middle of my dough and I'm gonna flour my hands really quickly. Okay, so now I'm gonna take the edges of my dough and put it around the butter so that it's covering it. Okay, so I wrapped up my butter in my dough and I'm gonna flip it over and dust the top with some flour. And I'm gonna gently press it down with my rolling pin. So now that I've reached my desired size, I'm gonna use a dry brush and sweep off any excess flour. Okay, so now that I have rolled out my dough, I'm gonna fold it into thirds like an envelope. Okay, so now I'm gonna rotate it so that it looks like a book about to be opened. And I'm gonna repeat all the steps I did before, so let's do that. So now I have my plastic wrap again, and I'm gonna wrap this up and refrigerate it for another 30 minutes so that the gluten can relax. Okay, so I just took my dough out of the refrigerator and I refloured my workspace. So we're gonna take it out. Okay, so now we're gonna repeat our rolling out steps. So let's do that. Okay, so now that I've given my dough 2 more turns, I'm gonna wrap it up in plastic wrap and refrigerate it for at least an hour or overnight. Okay, so I took my dough out of the refrigerator, and right now I'm going to flour my workspace, as well as my hands, and put the dough on the floured workspace. And now I need to cut it in half with a pizza cutter. Okay, and now I'm going to wrap and refrigerate 1/2. So let's go. Okay, so now I'm going to roll half of my dough into a 13 by 18 inch rectangle. Okay, so now I'm gonna trim a 1/4 inch all the way around my dough. You can use a ruler if you want, I'm just choosing not to. Okay, so now you're gonna cut your dough into thirds. I like to use my finger to draw an outline for my cutter on the dough. You don't have to do that, but it just makes it a lot easier to cut. So now we're going to cut them in half again down the center to give you 6 4 by 9 inch pieces. You don't have to use a pizza cutter, I just think it's a lot easier than using a regular knife. We're going to cut our pieces diagonally like this one is. Okay, so now I'm going to arrange all of my triangles so that they're facing away from me and gently stretch them to make them longer. Okay, so now we're going to roll up our croissants so that the tip is on the underneath. We're going to repeat the steps on our second half. With my edges, I can make more croissants. Okay, so now we're going to make the egg wash. And for that, I need to crack 1 egg and beat my egg with a tablespoon of water until combined. Okay, so now we're going to grease our baking pan with cooking spray and place our croissants on it. Okay, so now that we have our croissants on our baking pan, we're gonna rub them with the egg wash. Okay, so now we're going to grease our second baking sheet and put on our second. Okay, so now I'm going to put my 2 trays of croissants in the oven for 15 minutes at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. And then after those 15 minutes, I'm going to reduce the heat to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake for 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so now I'm going to put my 2 trays of croissants in the oven for 15 minutes at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. And then after those 15 minutes, I'm going to reduce the heat to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake for 10 to 15 minutes. So mine are done, so now we can take them out of the oven. Okay, so I've finished and decorated my croissants. Let's take a bite. This is very good. Let me know in the comments if you made it, and let me know any recipes you would like me to make. See you next time on Cooking with Keely.